7 signs you're in a toxic relationship, not just a bad one. There's a crucial difference between a bad relationship and a toxic one that most people don't understand until it's too late. Bad relationships have problems that can be worked through with communication, effort, and sometimes professional help. Toxic relationships, according to relationship researchers, contain patterns of behavior that systematically undermine your mental health, self-worth, and ability to function as an independent person. Dr. John Gottman, who has studied over 3,000 couples for more than 4 decades, can predict with 94% accuracy whether a relationship will end in divorce just by observing specific communication patterns for a few minutes. But his research reveals something even more important. Certain relationship dynamics don't just predict breakup, they predict lasting psychological damage to the people involved. The distinction matters because staying in a toxic relationship while trying to fix it can cause what researchers call complex trauma. Psychological wounds that affect your ability to trust, form healthy relationships, and maintain self-esteem long after the relationship ends. Understanding whether you're dealing with relationship problems or relationship toxicity can literally save years of your life and protect your mental health. Today, we're going to explore 7 research-backed signs that distinguish toxic relationships from merely difficult ones. These aren't subjective opinions or relationship advice. They're behavioral patterns that psychologists and researchers have identified as psychologically harmful, regardless of the intentions behind them. You'll learn why toxic relationships often feel addictive, how they systematically erode your sense of reality, and most importantly, how to recognize these patterns before they cause lasting damage. Before we begin, I need to be clear about the scope and purpose of this discussion. Important disclaimer: this video presents educational information about relationship dynamics based on psychological research. It is not intended to diagnose relationship issues, provide therapy, or replace professional counseling. Relationships are complex and individual situations vary greatly. If you're experiencing abuse, domestic violence, or feel unsafe in your relationship, please contact professional resources like the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233, or local emergency services. The information presented should not be used to make major life decisions without consulting qualified relationship counselors, therapists, or other appropriate professionals. Individual circumstances, cultural factors, and personal history all influence relationship dynamics in ways that general information cannot address. The reality distortion field. The first sign that distinguishes a toxic relationship from a bad one is what Dr. Robin Stern calls gaslighting. Systematic manipulation of your perception of reality. This isn't just disagreeing about what happened or having different perspectives on events. Gaslighting involves deliberate attempts to make you question your own memory, judgment, and sanity. Dr. Stephanie Sarkis's research on gaslighting identifies specific behavioral patterns that create what she calls reality distortion. The person engaging in gaslighting will deny events that clearly happened, claim you said or did things you didn't do, minimize their harmful behavior while exaggerating your reactions, and consistently reframe situations to make you appear irrational or oversensitive. What makes gaslighting particularly damaging is how it affects your neurobiology. Dr. Jennifer Sfrade's research on betrayal trauma shows that when someone you trust consistently contradicts your perception of reality, it creates cognitive dissonance that actually changes how your brain processes information. You begin to doubt your own judgment and rely increasingly on the gaslighter's version of reality. The long-term effects are severe. Dr. Robin Stern's clinical research found that people who experience prolonged gaslighting often develop symptoms similar to post-traumatic stress disorder, including hypervigilance, memory problems, difficulty making decisions, and chronic self-doubt that persists long after the relationship ends. In healthy relationships, when partners disagree about events or have different perspectives, they work together to understand each other's viewpoints and find common ground. The goal is mutual understanding, not winning or making the other person feel crazy. If your partner consistently makes you feel like you can't trust your own perceptions, memory, or judgment, that's not a communication problem. It's a serious form of psychological manipulation. Dr. George Simon's research on manipulative behavior shows that gaslighting often escalates gradually, starting with small contradictions and building to more significant reality distortions. By the time victims recognize the pattern, their confidence in their own perceptions has been severely undermined, making it difficult to trust their assessment of the situation. The key distinction from normal relationship conflicts is intentionality and pattern. Everyone occasionally misremembers events or has different interpretations of situations. Gaslighting involves consistent patterns of reality distortion that serve to maintain power and control over another person's sense of what's real and true. The isolation strategy. The second toxic relationship sign is systematic isolation from your support network. This goes far beyond a partner who doesn't particularly like your friends or family. Dr. Lundy Bancroft's research on abusive relationships identifies isolation as one of the most reliable predictors of escalating relationship toxicity. Toxic partners use sophisticated strategies to separate you from people who care about you and might offer alternative perspectives on your relationship. Dr. Julia Wood's communication research shows that this isolation happens through several predictable patterns: criticizing your friends and family, creating conflict whenever you spend time with others, manufacturing emergencies that coincide with your social plans, and gradually increasing demands on your time and attention. The isolation often begins subtly. Your partner might express hurt feelings when you spend time with friends, suggest that your family doesn't understand your relationship, or create situations where choosing them over others seems like the loving thing to do. Over time, these seemingly reasonable requests become unreasonable demands for total availability and attention. Dr. Donald Dutton's research on intimate partner violence found that isolation serves multiple purposes in toxic relationships. It eliminates sources of reality checking that might help you recognize problematic patterns, removes potential sources of support if you decide to leave, and creates emotional dependence on the toxic partner as your primary source of social connection and validation. The psychological impact of isolation is profound. Dr. Sheldon Cohen's research on social support shows that humans require diverse social connections for emotional regulation, stress management, and maintaining perspective on their lives. When toxic relationships systematically eliminate these connections, it creates vulnerability to further manipulation and control. In contrast, healthy relationships encourage and support your connections with friends, family, and colleagues. Healthy partners might not love all your friends, but they respect your right to maintain relationships that are important to you. They don't create drama around your social activities or make you choose between your relationship and other significant people in your life. Dr. Patricia Evans's research on controlling relationships shows that isolation often accelerates. During major life transitions like moves, job changes, or major life events when you're more dependent on your partner and less connected to your usual support systems. The warning signs include feeling like you need permission to see friends or family, noticing that most of your social connections have gradually disappeared since the relationship began, feeling anxious about your partner's reaction when you make social plans, and finding that conversations with others increasingly center on your partner's preferences and reactions rather than your own interests and experiences. It's the emotional roller coaster. The third sign of relationship toxicity is what Dr. Lenore Walker calls the cycle of abuse. Predictable patterns of tension, explosion, and reconciliation that create trauma bonding and emotional dependency. This isn't just having ups and downs in your relationship. This is systematic emotional manipulation that keeps you constantly off balance and unable to predict your partner's behavior. Dr. Walker's research identified 3 distinct phases in toxic relationship cycles. The tension-building phase involves increasing irritability, criticism, and emotional distance from your partner. The explosion phase includes emotional, verbal, or physical outbursts that leave you feeling scared, confused, or emotionally devastated. The honeymoon phase involves apologies, promises to change, romantic gestures, and temporary return to loving behavior. What makes this cycle particularly damaging is how it affects your brain's reward systems. Dr. Helen Fisher's neuroscience research on love and attachment shows that unpredictable reinforcement schedules, receiving love and affection inconsistently, create stronger psychological bonds than consistent positive treatment. Your brain becomes addicted to the relief and joy of the honeymoon phase, making it difficult to focus on the harm caused during tension and explosion phases. Dr. Judith Herman's research on complex trauma found that people in cyclical toxic relationships often develop symptoms similar to Stockholm Syndrome, where victims develop positive feelings toward their abusers as a survival mechanism. The intermittent kindness during honeymoon phases can feel so intense and relieving that it overshadows the psychological damage from other phases. The long-term effects include chronic anxiety, hypervigilance, difficulty trusting your own emotions, and what Dr. Bessel van der Kolk calls emotional dysregulation, losing the ability to maintain stable emotional states independent of your partner's behavior and moods. In healthy relationships, emotional tone remains relatively stable over time. Partners have conflicts and disagreements, but they don't involve extreme emotional swings, threats, intimidation, or dramatic reconciliations. Healthy partners don't withdraw love and affection as punishment, then return it as a reward for compliance. Dr. Sandra Brown's research on pathological relationships shows that the emotional roller coaster often intensifies over time, with shorter honeymoon phases and more intense explosion phases as the toxic partner becomes more confident in their control and the victim becomes more emotionally dependent. The key warning signs include walking on eggshells to avoid triggering your partner's anger, feeling relief that feels almost like euphoria when your partner is being kind after a period of tension, finding yourself making excuses for your partner's behavior to friends and family, and noticing that your emotional state depends entirely on your partner's mood and treatment of you. The identity erosion. The fourth sign of relationship toxicity is systematic erosion of your individual identity, interests, and goals. Dr. Lisa Aronson Fontes's research on psychological abuse identifies identity suppression as one of the most damaging aspects of toxic relationships because it affects your ability to know yourself independent of the relationship. This erosion happens through what Dr. Evan Stark calls coercive control. Subtle but persistent efforts to reshape your personality, interests, and life goals to match your partner's preferences and needs. Unlike healthy compromise and mutual influence, this process is one-sided and serves to eliminate aspects of yourself that your partner finds threatening or inconvenient. Dr. Amy Holtzworth Monroe's research shows that identity erosion typically targets several key areas: your career goals and professional ambitions, hobbies and interests that don't include your partner, personal values and beliefs that differ from theirs, and aspects of your personality that they label as problematic or unacceptable. The process often begins with seemingly caring suggestions. Your partner might express concern that your job is too stressful, suggest that certain friends are bad influences, or discourage hobbies they claim take too much time away from the relationship. Over time, these suggestions become expectations, and eventually demands for you to eliminate parts of yourself that don't align with their vision of who you should be. Dr. Jennifer Acker's research on identity and well-being shows that maintaining a coherent sense of self, knowing your values, interests, and goals is crucial for psychological health. When toxic relationships systematically attack this self-knowledge, it creates what researchers call identity confusion that can persist long after the relationship ends. The neurobiological impact is significant. Dr. Matthew Lieberman's research on the neural basis of identity shows that threats to our sense of self activate the same brain regions as physical pain. Chronic identity suppression creates ongoing neurological stress that affects memory, decision-making, and emotional regulation. In healthy relationships, partners support each other's individual growth and maintain respect for differences in personality, interests, and goals. They might influence each other over time, but this influence is mutual and doesn't require either person to eliminate core aspects of themselves. Dr. Kristen Neff's research on self-compassion found that people in toxic relationships often develop harsh internal criticism toward aspects of themselves that their partner has targeted, creating lasting damage to self-esteem and self-acceptance even after the relationship ends. Warning signs include finding yourself unable to remember what you enjoyed before the relationship, feeling anxious or guilty when pursuing interests your partner doesn't share, noticing that your opinions and preferences have become identical to your partner's, and realizing that you consistently prioritize your partner's needs and goals over your own without reciprocal consideration. The double standard system. The fifth toxic relationship sign is systematic double standards where different rules apply to you and your partner. Dr. Patricia Evans's research on controlling relationships identifies this pattern as inequality maintenance, behavioral systems that ensure the toxic partner maintains superior status and privileges within the relationship. These double standards manifest in numerous ways that become normalized over time. Your partner may demand complete honesty from you while regularly lying or withholding information. Expect you to be available whenever they want attention while being unavailable when you need support. Criticize behaviors in you that they regularly engage in themselves, and require you to meet standards of perfection that they don't apply to their own behavior. Dr. John Gottman's research on relationship dynamics shows that healthy relationships are characterized by what he calls emotional reciprocity. Both partners giving and receiving support, respect, and consideration in roughly equal measures over time. Toxic relationships deliberately maintain imbalance that serves the toxic partner's need for control and superiority. The psychological impact of consistent double standards is severe. Dr. Albert Bandura's research on self-efficacy shows that when people are held to unreasonable standards while watching others violate those same standards, without consequences, it creates learned helplessness and erodes confidence in your own worth and judgment. Dr. Martin Seligman's research on depression found that people who experience consistent double standards often develop what he calls explanatory style problems. They begin to attribute their partner's bad behavior to external circumstances, while attributing their own normal human mistakes to fundamental character flaws. The double standards often extend to emotional expression and needs. Your partner may expect unlimited patience and understanding for their moods, mistakes, and bad days while responding to your emotional needs with irritation, criticism, or dismissal. They may demand forgiveness immediately for their harmful behavior while holding grudges against you for minor infractions. Dr. Sue Johnson's research on emotionally focused therapy shows that healthy relationships require what she calls emotional accessibility. Both partners need to be available and responsive to each other's emotional needs. Double standard systems ensure that only one person's emotional needs are prioritized and validated. In healthy relationships, both partners are held to similar standards of respect, honesty, and consideration. When one partner makes a mistake, both people work together to repair the damage without fundamental inequality in how problems are addressed or resolved. The warning signs include noticing that you're always the one apologizing even when conflicts weren't your fault, feeling like you can never meet your partner's expectations, while they don't seem to have similar expectations for themselves, realizing that your needs and feelings are consistently treated as less important than theirs, and finding yourself making excuses for behavior from your partner that you would never accept from anyone else in your life. The financial and practical control. The sixth sign of relationship toxicity is systematic control over your financial resources and practical independence. Dr. Jody Raphael's research on economic abuse identifies financial control as one of the most effective methods of maintaining power in toxic relationships. because it affects your ability to leave and maintain independence. Financial control takes many forms beyond obvious economic abuse. Dr. Adrian Adams's research shows that toxic partners often interfere with your ability to work or advance in your career. Control access to bank accounts and credit cards. Make unilateral decisions about major purchases or financial commitments. Hide financial information or debt. Create financial dependencies that make leaving the relationship economically difficult. The control extends beyond money to practical aspects of independence. This might include limiting your access to transportation, interfering with your education or professional development. Taking control of important documents like ID or passport, and making decisions about living situations that prioritize their convenience over your autonomy. Dr. Chris Sullivan's research on domestic violence found that economic control often escalates gradually and may not be recognized as abuse by victims or even perpetrators. It often begins with seemingly helpful offers to manage finances or career decisions, then progresses to more controlling behavior once dependency is established. The psychological impact involves what Dr. Martin Seligman calls learned helplessness. When people experience repeated inability to control important aspects of their lives, they often generalize this helplessness to situations where they actually do have options and power. Dr. Lenore Walker's research shows that financial control creates practical barriers to leaving toxic relationships that are separate from emotional attachment. Even when people recognize the toxicity, they may feel trapped by economic circumstances that the toxic partner has systematically created. In healthy relationships, both partners have input into financial decisions that affect them. Maintain some level of financial independence or transparent joint decision-making. Support each other's career and educational goals, and respect each other's need for practical autonomy in daily life management. The warning signs include feeling like you need permission to spend money on normal expenses, noticing that your career or education has suffered since the relationship began, realizing that your partner makes unilateral decisions about finances that affect you, finding that you don't have access to important financial information or resources, and feeling financially dependent in ways that seem designed rather than coincidental. The normalization of disrespect. The seventh, and perhaps most insidious sign of relationship toxicity is the gradual normalization of disrespectful treatment. Dr. Lundy Bancroft's research on psychological abuse shows that toxic relationships systematically lower your standards for how you should be treated, until behaviors that would have been unacceptable early in the relationship become routine and expected. This normalization happens through what Dr. Albert Bandura calls moral disengagement, psychological mechanisms that make harmful behavior seem acceptable or justified. Your toxic partner may claim that their disrespectful treatment is normal in relationships, deserved because of your behavior, necessary because of external stressors, or evidence of their passion and caring about the relationship. Dr. Jennifer Freyd's research on institutional betrayal shows that when disrespect comes from someone who is supposed to care about you, it creates cognitive dissonance that people often resolve by adjusting their expectations downward rather than recognizing the unacceptability of the treatment. The types of disrespect that become normalized include name-calling, insults, and verbal attacks during conflicts. Public embarrassment or humiliation in front of others, dismissal of your thoughts, feelings, and opinions as invalid. Invasion of privacy, such as reading messages or monitoring activities. And physical intimidation or aggressive behavior that stops short of actual violence. Dr. John Gottman's research identified what he calls the 4 horsemen of relationship destruction: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. When these behaviors become routine rather than occasional, they indicate fundamental disrespect that predicts relationship failure and psychological harm. The long-term psychological effects include decreased self-esteem, difficulty recognizing disrespectful treatment in future relationships, acceptance of treatment that healthy people would immediately reject, and what Dr. Judith Herman calls complex trauma symptoms, including depression, anxiety, and interpersonal difficulties. In healthy relationships, both partners maintain basic respect even during conflicts and disagreements. They may get frustrated or angry, but they don't attack each other's character, use cruel language, or deliberately try to hurt each other emotionally. Healthy partners repair damage from occasional disrespectful moments rather than normalizing them. Dr. Sue Johnson's research shows that healthy relationships are characterized by what she calls emotional safety. Both partners feel secure that they won't be deliberately hurt, humiliated, or attacked by their partner even during difficult conversations or conflicts. The warning signs include finding yourself accepting treatment you would never tolerate from friends or colleagues, making excuses for your partner's disrespectful behavior to others, feeling like you deserve poor treatment because of your flaws or mistakes, and noticing that your standards for acceptable behavior have gradually lowered since the relationship began. Your path to healthier relationships, understanding these 7 signs, isn't about judging your current relationship harshly or jumping to conclusions about your partner. It's about developing the awareness needed to distinguish between relationships that have problems and relationships that are fundamentally harmful to your psychological well-being. The research consistently shows that toxic relationship patterns tend to escalate over time rather than improve, regardless of your efforts to accommodate, understand, or fix the dynamic. Dr. Donald Dutton's longitudinal studies found that without professional intervention and genuine commitment to change from the toxic partner, these patterns typically worsen rather than resolve through time, love, or patience. If you recognize several of these patterns in your relationship, please consider consulting with qualified professionals who specialize in relationship dynamics and can provide personalized guidance for your specific situation. This might include individual therapy to help you process your experiences and develop clarity about your options. Couples counseling if both partners are genuinely committed to change. Or domestic violence resources if you're experiencing abuse or feel unsafe. Remember that healthy relationships do exist and are achievable. Dr. John Gottman's research shows that healthy couples maintain what he calls positive sentiment override, an overall foundation of respect, affection, and goodwill that helps them navigate normal relationship challenges without damaging each other psychologically. The goal isn't perfection, but rather mutual respect, emotional safety, and support for each other's individual growth and well-being. You deserve relationships where you feel valued, respected, and free to be yourself without fear of retaliation, manipulation, or systematic erosion of your self-worth. Your awareness of these patterns is the first step toward healthier relationships. Whether that means working to improve your current relationship with professional help, or recognizing that some relationships cannot be repaired and require difficult but necessary endings. Trust your perceptions, value your well-being, and remember that everyone deserves relationships characterized by mutual respect, genuine care, and emotional safety. The research has shown us what healthy relationships look like, and that knowledge can guide you toward the fulfilling connections you deserve.